Hello, everyone. We'll give it a couple minutes before we get going. I did want to let you know that we will be recording this presentation and it will go up on the website afterwards. So if you have to jump off, we will be able to share everything that is shared today online, and we will also share the PowerPoint presentation as well in a follow-up email. We'll give it a couple minutes. I know a lot of people are logging in right now. We do have a full schedule today, and I do want to make sure we cover as much as we can in the hour and be respectful of everyone's time. So we will get going. If you have any questions, feel free to throw it into the chat or Q&A. I will get to as many as I can at the end. And if I'm not able to get to all of them, I will follow up via email. And, it's possible that one of the comments or questions that you guys submit will end up in a future presentation, depending on, what's going on in the world today of THC beverage. So we'll get going here. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. And if you can't, please throw a comment in the chat so I know I can make adjustments. But we'll start moving forward here. Let me adjust my screen a little. And here we go. All right, so thank you for coming to our Today in THC Beverage Marketplace update. There's been a lot of things going on from the regulatory standpoint, as well as just trends and shifts that we're seeing in the marketplace. So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the market and also reintroduce CABA, because there's a lot of new people that have registered for this particular presentation. So just want to give a brief overview of who CABA is, what our missions are, and kind of where our lane is in terms of the world of associations and coalitions that you guys are hearing about in the world today. We'll also cover some trends and obviously what everyone's probably here for are regulatory updates at the state and federal level. There are some hot topics being discussed in various markets. I know everyone is thinking about Texas right now. So we will touch on that, but we will also go into what are the pain points that we're hearing at the state level, and then what's to come, how you guys can get involved in supporting either federal initiatives as well as the state level initiatives. We'll also talk about events and education. There's a lot of need for education at the state and federal level. That's going to be ongoing until we have true normalization. But that leads me to the graph that you're seeing on this slide. So if you've been on one of these presentations before, you know that this is one of my favorite slides to show. And the reason that I share this image is because a lot of people talk about normalization of cannabis. And the reality is the normalization of cannabis has kind of already happened for the consumer. The regulations are playing catch up. And what I mean by that is what's demonstrated in this slide, which is showing that daily cannabis consumption surpassed daily alcohol consumption in 2022. Obviously, that's partially because of legalization and what we're seeing in certain marketplaces that have created safe access channels through medical and recreational channels, but it's also because of the hemp industry and where we are today. So 2022 was when that pivotal moment shifted, and we know that that shift has continued over time. But this really puts in perspective the fact that regardless of where regulation is, the consumers are finding these products and they're interested in them, they want them, and you can't regulate away demand. And we'll talk a little bit about that more when we go into the regulatory sections. So what's a coalition? So I get a lot of questions about CABA and what we are and what we're not. One thing that we focus on a lot is education. That's partially because of who I am. I am a beverage enthusiast. A THC beverage is the only way I consume cannabis because as a low-dose consumer, it's one of the only ways I can control my experience. It's also one of the only ways that really socially blended into my lifestyle. I definitely represent, I think, what a lot of people consider their target demographic on the brand side, which is is that 30 to 45-year-old female, someone who's walking the aisles of a Total Wine and More, or, going into convenience stores when they're getting gas and picking up some products. I am that person. And so I think as a result, I've really taken to this category and it's become a real passion of mine. But CABA itself is a coalition that is really mission-based. So associations typically create a community. You see Slack channels. The HBA, Hemp Beverage Alliance, is a great example of that, where there's a Slack channel, there's a lot of sharing of information. They host events. They do a lot of things that are great for the industry as a whole. Coalitions are really mission-based. So our goal and the reason that CABA was created was to take political action, specifically at the federal level. So appropriations and the Farm Bill. We're going to dive into those in depth in a little bit, but those were the two reasons that we created our coalition last year. And it was because of the imminent threat that the appropriations bill at the time, FY25, and the Farm Bill had in terms of shutting down intoxicating hemp at the federal level. So what our goals are to not only keep open the intoxicating hemp marketplace at the federal level, but also advocate for sensible regulation, a lot of which, because we represent beverage only, very much represents and reflects what you see on the adult beverage side already, which is being sold through traditional alcohol distribution and retail, 21 plus, third-party testing, standardized packaging, all things that you would see on the adult beverage side. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just talking about a new active ingredient. But one thing we will want to focus on once we're beyond the appropriations and Farm Bill threats this year is really dedicated legislation. No one wants to be tied to a renewable bill that at any time can shift the regulatory landscape. So what we'll look to do in the future is actually create dedicated legislation that puts this category in particular through TTB and other regulatory bodies, again, very similar to how alcohol is being regulated, sold, and distributed within the US. As I mentioned, we are federally focused. I am based in DC. I do a lot of meetings on the Hill with our federal lobbyist, who is a top 10 lobbyist. We brought in someone who had experience on the alcohol side, but also had a sister firm that they work with that is very focused on the House and Department of Ag, because obviously we are dealing very much right now with the Farm Bill and Department of Ag approps, which is all Department of Ag. In the future, we will be dealing with alcohol groups like TTB, and we will want someone who's very familiar with that atmosphere. So we have a 2-for-1, if you will, in terms of our lobby firms that represent us at the national level. At the state level, we focus a lot on education. And a lot of you who know me know I've traveled a lot over the last year to do education at the state level so that we can help influence and guide them for proper regulation of the category and safe access to consumers. When there is, and we'll talk a lot about this later with some of the key states we're focused on, when there are specific initiatives at the state level, CABA does not fund lobbying efforts or anything like that. We will support other groups that are funding lobbying at the state level. So we'll throw our weight behind groups like Bayou City Hemp in Texas, or the Texas Package Store Association, or we'll find other groups like Vicente Law that is focused on creating a coalition in Colorado. So we'll talk more about those, but just to give you guys an idea, our funding goes entirely towards our federal initiatives. And then I travel and do education at the state level because states' rights is ultimately what we're looking for from really defined regulatory structures, which again, very similar to alcohol. So what's on the shelf? We're going to talk a little bit about trends and things that we're seeing really pop off here. In the beginning, it was all about ready to drink. So you see this Howdy, ranch water on the left-hand side. So the single packs and 4-packs are the ones that are continuously moving. We've seen a lot of growth in that area, but it's very saturated. So we've started seeing a lot of momentum in the shots and single format. So whether it is a 2 or 3 ounce shot, similar to the soberish one here we have on the right, or it's a liquid or powder stick pack, which is like this can roti and this sprinkle here, or the spirits-like products. So the 750 milliliter milliliter bottles that you are seeing out there that are doing very well at liquor stores in particular. What they've also noted is that these 2 to 3 ounce shots that are oftentimes being positioned as beverage mixers are really great if you are looking to eventually upsell to that 750 milliliter bottle, because that's usually a 50 to to $75 investment, maybe $40 investment. And if people aren't sure if they like the flavor profile, they might prefer to start with that 2 or 3 ounce sample, give it a whirl, see if they like the flavor profile, and then continuously build off of that and purchase that larger format. So we're seeing a lot of that do well, particularly at point of sale, but also with convenience coming online. These smaller formats are things that do very well at point of sale, which can be very carefully age gated and controlled, or even put behind the counter, which obviously they're very familiar with because of tobacco products, which are obviously continuously on the decline. So these are kind of the traditional form factors, but a lot of growth in these beverage mixers and smaller formats as well. So the opportunity, I mean, we talk a lot about demographics, and it's really anyone 21 plus. But what we're really seeing this as being an opportunity is because retailers are reporting that 1/3 of the THC beverage consumers that are coming into their stores are new to their stores. So this is an opportunity. If you're a retailer and you sell other products in your store, party supplies, snacks, things like that, this is an opportunity for you to sell into those newer consumers as well. And ultimately, that's what you're looking for, right? Increased cart size. And if people are shopping for parties, they're usually buying alcohol as well as THC beverage. So having these products available in the same location is really crucial to that shopping experience and not potentially losing a consumer to another retailer. Consumption behavior. I always want to include this because every time I present this slide at a different show, I get a different response from it. So one thing I want to, first of all, be very clear on is THC and alcohol have very different experiences, and how they're intoxicating to the body is very different to the consumer, which is why consumers let the experience and the desired effect dictate what beverage they prefer. So while a lot of people might say that these are alternatives or they are, switching from alcohol to THC beverage, there's also an opportunity for people to just add an additional option into their drinking occasion. I actually consume more adult beverages now because I have the ability to have a THC beverage on a Tuesday night when I probably wouldn't open a beer or open a bottle of wine. But having a THC beverage that's going to help me maybe wind down at the end of the night, flavor forward, lower in calorie, that's something that's really appealing to me. When I'm out with my girlfriends, I'm still going to split that bottle of wine because you guys know, a lot of the people on this call who know me know that if red wine were ever on the chopping block, I would start lobbying for them too. But it is important to answer the question for the consumer of what are the comparable intoxication levels. Anecdotal evidence has shown that new consumers feel that a 2.5 milligram THC beverage has the same intoxication level or impairment level as a light beer, 12-ounce light beer, or half a glass of wine, so 4 ounces or so, depending on how you pour your wine. But it's ultimately that asterisk there is very important. It is a start low, go slow mentality because everyone is sensitive. Everyone's tolerance for THC is different, and their alcohol tolerance has no correlation to their THC tolerance. So it does not matter if you are the world champion of drinking whiskey, your THC tolerance might be minimal. I come from an Irish Italian background. Trust me, my THC tolerance is much lower than what my alcohol tolerance was because of my heritage here and the affinity for celebrating alongside alcohol. So it is important that everybody learns their tolerance, but it's also important for people to understand that THC is not habit forming in the same way that alcohol and other active ingredients are, which is why you hear concerns from groups like the FDA when they start to see caffeine and other ingredients that might be habit forming added to products that have THC in them. So that is why you see extra careful attention to that. Everyone remembers the Four Loko formulation that had to be changed and therefore removed the caffeine because they felt it was creating a habit forming and very high intoxication levels and causing people to have adverse effects. So we are obviously trying to be proactive and eliminate those or mitigate those experiences for consumers. So education is key. Responsible consumption needs to be something that is shared across the board. So this is why we provide this guideline. Normalization of THC beverages. So we've talked a little bit about trends, but we're going to do a deep dive. Now, most recently, there was a feature in Forbes that was talking about the Texas legislature in particular, and they talked about the 2025 alcohol sales and the decline there. That is very real. Decline in beer and wine and spirits is there for various reasons, and this is something we need to understand. While there are definitely health and wellness focuses that shift our lifestyle behaviors. There's also things like GLP-1s, which are the Ozempics and the Manjuris, and there's a few of them, and I can't pronounce all of them, but essentially the diet supplement that is a medication and is obviously recommended that you don't consume alcohol while consuming GLP-1s. I had a conversation recently with a beer wholesaler, and beer was his go-to in terms of alcohol preferences. And he's been on a GLP-1 for nearly 2 years. So while they're very mainstream now and have been in the headlines for the last 6 months, you almost can't avoid it. This is someone who's been on this for 2 years. And so he was explaining that he now, just from feeling full, really only has the desire to have 1 to 2 beers at a single time. So if his decline is from a GLP-1 and he's been on this for the last 2 years, we might be seeing these shifts for different reasons other than just general health and wellness and youth being, looking for alternatives. There's many reasons that we are seeing shifts here, and we are still very early days in terms of understanding consumer data and, behavioral data as well as to why people might be making this shift. But the reason that beer and wine wholesalers are so in on this category is partially because of the alcohol sales being down, but does not mean it's a one-to-one direct replacement necessarily for consumers. Wholesaler margins, we are also hearing that on average, particularly for beer wholesalers, that the margins are $25 per case, which is significantly higher than what they are seeing for other products. So this is a real opportunity, and why we're seeing a shift, and have seen a recent study that reported that 50% of beer distributors now are moving hemp THC beverages. That is about 26% increase from last year. So we are seeing growth and repeated growth over and over. And I can tell you from my inbound requests, the education at the state level is coming from beer and wine wholesalers who are entering the space, and they want to make sure it is here to stay at the state level. So they're bringing us in to help with crafting regulation and educating their regulators and legislators. The other thing to keep in mind is hospitality. Bars and restaurants typically make over 50% of their profits from alcohol sales and beverage sales. Obviously, very big margins in comparison to food generally. So GLP-1s might actually be impacting that as well if people aren't eating as much and aren't snacking as much, and therefore are looking for maybe an alternative on the beverage side where they can still make that margin up. This is a huge opportunity for THC beverage. This is also why we could see a lot of movement in C-stores, because outside of fuel, beverage and snacks are their top, and of course tobacco, but that is also on the decline, are their top performing SKUs. So if snacking is down, alcohol sales are down. This means that they are looking for other things to fill those shelves. And whether that is small format that's behind the counter or ready to drink beverages that are being put in their, refrigerated sections is, an opportunity that they are very interested in. Now, in terms of dosage, I think everyone's seen the data out there. The leading SKUs right now are 10 milligram drinks. As we start seeing mainstream adoption, and it's not just in the Circle K's and Total Wines and a couple major retailers, but we start seeing major distributors enter this space, major big box stores enter this space, then we're going to see real mainstream adoption. And that's when I believe we will start seeing that low dose consumer who hasn't yet entered the market but's curious. That's when they're going to start entering. So don't sleep on those 2 to 5 milligram serving sizes. That is my sweet spot. That's where a lot of my friends' sweet spots are. We're splitting these 5 or 10 milligram drinks when we're at parties and things like that. Plus 2 to 5 milligrams is great for on-premise, because on-premise bars and restaurants want volume. So sessionable drinks between 2 and 5 milligrams are going to have a sweet spot for on-premise. So don't sleep on that. But there are huge opportunities here. And we're going to touch on C-stores in particular right now, because there's a real movement there. Earlier this year, Alabama and a handful of other states put out regulation that limited where THC beverages could be sold to package store only. This left out convenience stores, and that created a little bit of a rally cry because convenience stores traditionally have gone head to head with liquor for different categories in the past and wanting access to both. The language I've heard coming out of the convenience side is that regulators and legislators shouldn't choose winners when it comes to channels in the marketplace, as long as they're properly age gating and verifying that these products are safe and that they're getting into adult hands and not minors' hands, that they should have the same access. And there's no retail channel larger than convenience in terms of who checks more IDs per day. Convenience checks a lot of IDs per day, and one of the leading C stores in Minnesota that is leading this category checks over 18,000 IDs a day. And that's an incredible amount of people coming through that store in a day, but also it just goes to show how important this channel is and why we don't want to use the Food and Fuel C-store platform when we're looking for regulation in this space. So the two top legislative concerns we hear about C-stores having access to these products are, what about the kids? So age gating and access to minors, and then the number of retail locations. In Texas in particular, this came up when they said there's 8,500 retailers right now selling THC beverage products, and we want to reduce that. When you come in with a solution like C-stores, oftentimes that would actually increase the number of retail locations because, look, Texas is a big state. You need gas to get from one side to the other, and forget if you need to go to other, border states. You need gas. And so a lot of people will consistently have foot traffic, so the number of retail locations goes up. So from a number standpoint, sometimes we have to get creative in explaining why this opportunity can create safe access, even though the number of retail locations might go up. So from a visibility standpoint, it's all about positioning. Right now, there are 17 markets that have that are using Farm Bill compliance, which means C-stores might have access and be distributing these products. Obviously, Minnesota and Georgia being unique in that they are one of the only states that led with convenience access, leading with access through convenience versus liquor. Liquor is not able to sell these products currently in Georgia. And then you have other markets like Tennessee, New Jersey, Kentucky, and Alabama that are focused liquor only. And sometimes they'll include grocery in that, just depending on how their regulations and licensing are handled. But we do have the convenience store organizations getting involved and engaged at the state level as well as the national level. But what I can tell you from my experience working with these groups is there's still a lot of education needed because they were more focused on other issues during regular session this year. They might not understand exactly where this marketplace is in the same way that liquor has gotten involved. So understanding everything from the supply chain management to testing to understanding certificates of analysis, all of that education is needed at the state level so that they can accurately represent why they want access to this particular category in their retail locations. State level awareness is just going to continue to be something we hammer over the years, particularly if we're able to keep this open at the federal level where they are advocating for states' rights and autonomy, which is very similar to alcohol. That's why that education is crucial. Urgency is key. So if you are working within a state and your convenience group has not yet been vocal about wanting access to this category, it's important that we get them involved now, because whether it is special session or session next year, if we're educating them next year in April, it's too late already. We need them to be activated at the beginning of this session, the beginning of the year, when those decisions and those conversations and those bills are being formed, because who we're walking in the room with matters, and walking in with liquor matters, walking in with convenience matters. And just so that you guys have perspective, the National Association of Convenience Stores represents over $800 billion in annual revenue. Wine and spirits wholesalers represents about 200 billion. So huge numbers on both sides, but 800 billion versus 200 billion. I mean, those are big numbers to be talking about. So this is why it's so important that we get the right leaders in the room to work with us. Now regulation. I feel like I should have led off this presentation with this, but at the end of the day, I feel like every time when I present on, where the states legally sit, I feel like I should say this presentation will self-destruct in the next 5 minutes, because every time I present on it, something happens within an hour. So I'll probably post an update after this talking about how something has shifted in one market or another. But this is a general, visualization for where we currently sit from a regulatory standpoint. So Farm Bill compliance is referring to if they don't currently have regulation in place specifically for regulating intoxicating hemp products. And then we have green, which are ones that specifically have THC beverage regulations in place. There are a handful of states, as you see, that are refining regulations. And then there are some that have bans or heavily restricted, which when we say that, we typically mean that there's either low dosage cap or restricted to very small number of retail channels. But in general, the common themes that we are seeing: age gating, taxes, being regulated by their local alcohol beverage board. And the other thing we're seeing a lot of, states are leaning, particularly those that have been restricted or banned and maybe have had an issue where there's been where there has been legal action taken or lawsuits. There's a lot of litigation in some of these states. And what they lean on the federal government for is, hey, we're being sued because they're saying we're violating federal regulation. You guys need more clear definitions so that we can regulate accordingly. So it's one of those things where we really need to get something in place at the federal level, because that will not only allow for investors and those larger distributors and box chains to enter the marketplace, but it will also create a baseline so that we can mitigate the litigation that's happening at the state level. It's very hard to lobby and work with regulators at the state level if they've been sued before by a group in your in your industry in general. It's just, if you tried to date someone, but someone in your friend group punched them before, it's pretty hard to try to date that person. So, it's one of those things where, look at it that way. These are all people and these are all relationships. And, litigation can cause a lot of tension when it comes to building that federal regulate or that state regulation in the future. But the demand is there and the consumers trust alcohol regulation. So I always like to include these slides, which are from the Center for Alcohol Policy. They did a survey of consumers that showed that consumers support regulation that looks like the alcohol model. They trust it, they understand it, and they believe it does a good job of mitigating access to minors. In terms of other things they'd like to see is limit potency of product, tax like alcohol, minimum drinking age of 21. You will see a lot of limit to dispensaries, and that was oftentimes in regards to higher dose products, which is very much in alignment with what the coalition stands for. We've defined our lower dose as being a range of up to 10 milligrams per serving, 100 milligrams per package, because those were the products that did not sell particularly well at this in the dispensary channel. Higher dose products have continued to do very well in the dispensary channel. So we would like to see higher dose products remain there. And what we obviously advocate for is to, work on improving the regulations on the marijuana side as well, to even that playing field, because ultimately we want safe access to consumers, and whether that is through the low dose channel or the high dose channel is really dependent on the consumer, and how they get access is important. Influential markets. So right now there's been a lot of attention to Kentucky, Alabama, and Tennessee. And it's mainly because these are the markets that put really comprehensive beverage regulation in place. They oftentimes restricted direct to consumer. ABC was generally the regulated body that oversaw the category. Three-tier influence in terms of how they want to see distribution and retail. And they also all focus on package store, liquor store only. In some states, we did see on-premise permitted, particularly Tennessee, where we continue to see really great progress. I think that could very well be the next case study behind Minnesota in terms of on-premise consumption, but also depending on how they handle their higher dosage caps, which they have a much higher dosage cap than what we see in other markets, which typically land around 5 or 10. They have a 15 milligrams per serving max of 2, and then 150 milligrams per container. Oh, let's talk about Texas. Texas is a tough one. Anyone who's watching Texas right now knows that they are in special session. They have a lot of priorities, including redistricting, flood recovery. They ultimately, intoxicating hemp is not one of their top priorities, although we are seeing bill traction, and we know that Governor Abbott has been vocal about wanting to see regulation of this space. However, the House Democrats left Texas. This is partially because of the redistricting that was proposed that would have heavily favored Republicans within the state. So those Democrats had to leave Texas because otherwise in Texas, they currently have a warrant out for their arrest if they are still in that state. So this is very unique. We do not typically see this. What we do have is Bayou City Hemp leading the charge in terms of sensible regulation in Texas. Carrie Hinkle is the lead there. CABA is advocating for their members to get behind them. They are very much aligned with CABA's initiatives, particularly because they are really focused on beverage, but also because they have been actively lobbying and educating on the Hill for years. They were involved in some prior legislation on the hemp side, but they are obviously based in Houston, and Texas loves Texas. So having someone based there is really important. There are obviously proposed ban bills. We know Dan Patrick has not let up on his initial focus. However, we know that there's a lot of support for regulation, and a lot of members in Texas have been very vocal about wanting to see regulation versus bans. The latest bill that we reviewed, which is this week, and we're still looking to kind of understand buy-in and how this will be utilized, had very high tax structures involved that really, in my opinion, start to reflect kind of backdoor bans. And I don't know if they realize that. Those are the conversations we're currently having, but I can tell you that multiple groups have been meeting with not only Speaker Burrows, but Governor Abbott's office, and have had very productive meetings. So this is a continual fight. And if you're looking to get involved, fundraise, and continue supporting groups that are actively advocating for sensible regulation in Texas, Bayou City Hemp is the group to get behind, and Carrie Hinkle's email is there available for you there. And if you'd like a direct intro through me, by all means, feel free to email me. My email will be at the end of this presentation if you don't already have it. And I will make a direct intro to you so that you can get involved. Colorado. So there's a real opportunity to lead here. And what's great about Colorado is that obviously they're one of the legacy markets. They currently have heavily restrictive regulatory structure. They have a 1.75 milligram of THC cap. They a 1.75 milligram cap, and they also have to have, I believe, 15 milligrams of CBD or another non-intoxicating cannabinoid for that to be permitted in that market. So you typically do not see a hemp market in Colorado. Vicente Law Group, which is one of the leading cannabis law firms in the market, is leading a coalition specific to lower dose hemp derived beverages. So 5 milligram cap is what they're advocating for. They are working on getting marijuana industry buy-in, so the dispensaries, retailers, groups like that, which we know we typically don't see opposition coming from the marijuana industry when we do that. But we've also had very productive meetings with the Attorney General, as well as the Convenience Store Association, the beer wholesaler groups. Vicente is really leading that charge. And if you'd like to get involved with their coalition, which has a number of leading beverages from Cycling Frog to Keef to Fable Libations, and a handful of others actively involved, Sean Hauser is the direct contact at Vicente that you can work with. I'm happy to make a direct intro as well if you'd like me to do that for you, but her email is on here, and they are actively looking for additional supporters. They also are hosting regular events where they've had groups like WSWA do local education. But ultimately, this is a real opportunity for Colorado to continue being a leader and hopefully also unify the hemp and marijuana channels. Florida. Florida right now is becoming an example of why we need standardization. I think a lot of brands that are on this call, and if you're a retailer in Florida, you know what's also happening. First, it was about marketing to kids, and they pulled a lot of product off shelves because of ingredients or colors, cartoons, things that were on packaging. And again, very vague definitions of what marketing to children is. So this is kind of an ongoing conversation happening there, but it looks like we've made some progress on the colors, cartoons, and ingredients. Now it's about servings. So now in Florida, and what they're asking for is for if there's multiple servings indicated on your can, let's say your can is 5 milligrams, but it says 2 servings because maybe that can was produced originally for a market that had lower serving sizes defined. Before, you could sell that can using that label in Florida, and it would be fine. Now they're saying if there's multiple servings, regardless of the dosage, you need to have child resistant or resealable packaging. Obviously, not only is that really cost ineffective for you, but it's also something we're not seeing in other markets. So from a scalability standpoint, it's a problem. This is going to impact about 80% of the brands currently on shelves. And the reason for that is that a lot of brands were using cans that they had originally produced maybe for the Minnesota market, which then changed their serving size definition to 10 milligrams and moved it, those cans therefore couldn't be used there. They started selling them in Florida, and now they can't be used there as well. So there's a lot of things that are being worked on right now in Florida, and right now the ask is for an extended grace period because they were looking to implement these regulations in June 15th, I believe, and now it's turning into something where they would like to see this extended till the end of the year. There are a number of groups working on this, and if you'd like to be involved in Florida initiatives working with a handful of other brands and retailers, please reach out to me directly. It is something that I can connect you with a couple of the leads there that can get you up to speed really quickly on what's happening in Florida and how to mobilize most effectively. So those are the 3 hot markets that we are getting the most inbound inquiries on. Then we jump into the federal. So this is the largest existential threat to the entire intoxicating hemp industry. There are 2 issues that I brought up in the beginning were the Farm Bill and then the Appropriations Department of Ag bill for 2026 now. The Farm Bill is unlikely to be finalized in 2025. It's a beast of a bill. Most of the issues that they are trying to agree on are not about intoxicating hemp. It's actually more about the SNAP program, food stamps, things like that. And farmers are obviously very focused on this particular initiative. So ultimately, it's probably not going to get done this year. What will likely get done this year, maybe it is extended from September 30th deadline to end of the year, but appropriations FY26, which is an annual budget bill for the Department of Ag. So it's already gone through House full committee markup. That was in June. Senate full committee was July 10th. And what you guys probably saw in the last couple of weeks was that the restrictive hemp language that was originally proposed by McConnell was stripped in an effort to continue making progress on appropriations. So Senator Rand Paul went head to head with McConnell and was really advocating for intoxicating hemp to stay open and different guardrails. So McConnell, as a result, pulled back his language, but did also go on record saying he still wanted to reinstate the original purpose of the Farm Bill and was still advocating for, the Harris language, if you will, which was the restrictive language that was put into the House bill. So right now we have these 2 drafts. We are now in August recess, which means September is go time. We are currently strategizing for how we can work together collectively with alcohol and other hemp industry groups to either strip that language from the House version or implement permissive language that puts guardrails in place for the things they're concerned about. Things to know, September 30th is the current deadline for appropriations FY26. If they are not able to meet that deadline, they will issue a continuing resolution, which would be basically an extension, and that would probably go till the end of 2025. It's possible they go further, but last year they did a full year CR, which because of a full year CR, which is pretty rare, and everyone wants to prove that they can do their job and accomplish things, they ultimately end up they will probably want to get something done by end of the year so that they don't have the same situation that they repeated for last year. Final passage, and in order for this to be presented to the president to sign for approval, the House and the Senate have to agree and approve a bill to be brought forward. The overall consensus at the federal level, and this is very important for everyone to take away from this, is that the demand is there and you can't regulate away demand. You can't ban something and expect the demand to go away. In Texas, we hear numbers like intoxicating hemp is an $8 billion industry. $8 billion industry doesn't go away because of a ban. It's too big. Whether it's $1 billion, it's probably too big to go away with a ban. So regulation is key. We're here now. Regulation moving forward is crucial. So the federal strategy, like I said, September sprint, we are using August to prepare for September. Hemp and alcohol groups have weekly calls where we are aligning and talking about wins they're having, strategy, and we are talking about how to work together on lobby day activity. So that is when we bring in different supporters into DC to meet with members and staffers to educate them on the category, guardrails they can put in place that still allow for a sustainable and thriving marketplace that also keeps the consumer safe. CABA will be working on a toolkit. We have letters, draft letters. We are putting together contact information for every state rep, particularly House Republicans, which is a huge focus for us. Beer wholesalers are aligning with us and engaging in a big way. This is partially because some of the federal associations are still bifurcated and therefore not necessarily prepared to, at the national level, say that they are comfortable with intoxicating hemp products. So as a result, some of our board members that are beer wholesalers, shout out to Justin Ashby from Southern Crown, have really led the charge in reaching out to beer wholesalers to get them aligned with CABA so that we can collaborate next month and really have a strong showing of beer wholesalers that prior to now really haven't been represented on the Hill. The other component to this is that we want to make sure that every state association knows that this is an existential threat to the regulations that were implemented at the state level. I've gotten a lot of calls over the last, I'd say probably, 2 to 4 weeks from groups saying, wait, real quick though, this wouldn't hurt what we did in Tennessee, right? Real quick, this wouldn't change what happened in Georgia, right? At the federal level, if there was a ban on intoxicating hemp, a full-on ban, it would supersede all of the regulation that's been implemented at the state level. And it's important for every association, particularly if their members want access to these products, to understand that. Week of August 18th, there will be a CABA members only kickoff where we walk through the full strategy, go through all the tools, make sure everyone kind of understands their marching orders, if you will. And then we will talk a little bit more about what that lobby day strategy looks like. So one thing I wanted to outline here, and I think it's important for everyone to understand, is the number one things that we hear about at the federal level also come up at the state level, but they're concerned around new and novel cannabinoids, primarily if they're 100% synthetic. You hear about THCP and HHC and a handful of others that are not naturally occurring. That's a big focal point right now for regulators and legislators to want to eliminate because that supports U.S. farmers. It also supports public safety, and they're also looking to protect jobs, particularly of U.S. farmers. Now, what's interesting about our category is that we are supporting jobs all up and down the alcohol supply chain as well. So there's an argument to be made that it goes much farther beyond U.S. farmers and, of course, the hemp brands themselves that have employees and whatnot. It's also going beyond our industry. So we can really show that web, if you will, of how many groups we're impacting. We also want to provide protection for groups that have federal licenses. That is one of the main reasons that some of the larger groups have not gotten involved is because they have federal licenses and they're worried about violating that. So we do need to make sure that when we create these federal guardrails that we are protecting those that have additional federal licenses in other categories. We're also looking to promote states' rights. Ultimately, there's over 30 states, and we don't love all the regs in all the states, but there's over 30 states with some form of regulation in place, whether it is a ban all the way through Tennessee with their higher dosage caps. So ultimately, any regulation that's put in place at the federal level, if it's not done carefully, it could supersede what's happening at the state level. And alcohol, and particularly conservative and Republican agencies, they would prefer to give states the authority to regulate their constituents the way their consumers want to. So ultimately, this is a strong position for us at the federal level, dealing with some of the administration that we have in place right now. We also want to eliminate risk of litigation, which I touched on earlier. We don't want states to feel like they're exposing themselves to litigation. We also want to make sure that we are working very cohesively with regulatory groups at the state and federal level. And obviously, things we've already talked about, bans just support an illicit market. At the end of the day, that's going to sacrifice public safety, but it's also going to impact state revenue and the job market. Colorado in particular, which wish I brought this up earlier, Colorado is going to be drastically impacted by the Big Beautiful bill in terms of their tax revenue. So they have a huge hole that they need to fill. THC beverages, as well as other, low dose hemp derived products, could very well be that, something that fills that gap. And that could be for other states as well. So it's something to think about. The other thing that we need to make sure everyone is aware of, especially at the federal level, but also at the state level, is the fact that we have data. We have a lot of data about beverage, and it's important that we all understand what that looks like. But ultimately, we have PK study data, which proves consistent experience. Multiple leading emulsion and ingredient suppliers have studies that document this. We also obviously advocate for certificates of analysis and QR codes on the side of the packaging to make it easy for distributors and retailers to verify that the product they are distributing and selling is safe. We also have, and I apologize that, there we go. We also have can liner studies. And so the reason this is important is because it's come up a lot more recently. We're getting a lot more technical questions, and we hadn't been getting this previously, but people are now becoming more aware of scalping. They want to make sure that if someone splits a can with a friend, that they're each getting half the dosage that's advertised on the can. And can liner studies is going to be crucial to this. So Ann Resco is an example of a group that did studies on can liners and has can liners that are approved for various emulsion technologies out there. So from Tetra Paks, PETs to the aluminum can liners, I think most people on this call know Ball Gen 2 is one of those that's approved. But that sort of data, sometimes they don't realize we have. And they assume that because it's still very difficult for us to control and report accurately on sales data, they don't realize that we actually have the safety data and the consistency data for them to feel comfortable with this category. This data has been incredibly important with some of the national and state associations and getting them on board with getting behind THC beverage category in general. And then I always put this slide up here for Aficionado. They do a hospitality training program. They do have a kind of like a 15-minute free education one that gives you a little bit of like a taste, if you will, of the cannabis industry and understanding THC from an intoxication standpoint. But the reason that we put this up here is because these sort of trainings are going to be imperative the more we see hospitality grow. We are seeing this grow in Tennessee, Florida, and a handful of other markets. So as a result, we need to make sure people have access to it and know they exist. There's more training programs becoming available, but Aficionado was really developed to be very similar to the Cicerone program for beer. And they've done this for non-alc as well as some other beverage categories already. So they're constantly improving upon this, but this is something that you can recommend and also use to introduce or show that we are not only self-regulating, but self-educating where we can to make sure that we're protecting the consumer at the end of the day. Industry integrity. So this is something I want to talk about before I dive into some of the fun stuff like events. LinkedIn, AI content. There's been a lot of AI content lately, and it has created a lot of people texting me and asking, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Did this happen? Be very careful what you use AI for and what you share on LinkedIn. And the reason that I'm sharing that is because the power of LinkedIn is incredible. The reach is amazing. People are using this tool to understand this category more than ever before. The issue and the concern is that if you don't use it responsibly, it is very quick for a game of telephone to turn into something that the FDA is seeing, that our alcohol allies are seeing on the alcohol side, and we need those partnerships. One person's actions, one brand's actions can take the entire industry back. We are still that sensitive of a marketplace. So please, we're all humans. We all make mistakes. We all post things that are, funny and comical. It's just got to be very clear if we are trying to make a joke or a funny, or if something isn't real and it's misrepresented, it could really negatively impact the industry. So please keep that in mind. We get a lot of outreach from regulatory groups who see things on LinkedIn, and we can obviously educate them and explain kind of what happened, but it's obviously a lot easier if we are just a lot more transparent, because we are trying to build consistency and trust. That is something that at the federal level, when it comes to the Farm Bill, they felt they got duped with the last Farm Bill. And it doesn't matter if we feel that it wasn't done disingenuously or not as an industry. If they feel they were duped, that's the reality we're living in. So we have to fix that. And the only way we can do that is through transparency, consistency, and being honest. That is how you build trust back. So be very careful about the content that you are sharing, even if you didn't create it. It is really important to the industry. And we are at a pivotal moment with this appropriations bill to show that we can be responsible and unified with the rest of hemp and with alcohol walking in beside us. It is a critical time for us to be on our best behavior, if you will. Upcoming events. So these are a couple of the key events that we are hearing will have representation and discussion around THC beverage. So National Association of Convenience Stores annual show in October. I will be presenting alongside Circle K. So we are really excited to be talking about kind of do's and don'ts for the space, but also opportunity within the convenience store channel and why this should be a channel that THC beverage groups don't sleep on. National Beer Wholesaler Association's annual show. This continues to be a great show for meeting key allies from the beer wholesaler world, and more of them are coming on board every day, like I said. So this is a show you want to make sure you have a presence at. The C-Store Women's event put on by Informa in November is also, if you're a woman in this space, this is a great opportunity for you to meet with other groups within the C-Store channel and help educate them on the category and represent your brand to some of the leaders in retail. And then the 2025 Beer Insight Seminar. This is November 9th through the 11th. This one is a very beer-focused beer industry event. Some real heavy hitters attend this show. So it's one that if it makes sense for you and your goals, this would be an event to definitely make sure that you attend in New York in November. Towards the end of the year, there will also be other shows at the beginning of 2026 that if you're, strapped on budget, you might want to evaluate what you want to do at the end of this year versus beginning of 2026. So keep that in mind, because there's so many events, and there are more events like BevNet and things like that in December, but I wanted to highlight these because I think there's real opportunity and maybe untapped market opportunity at these events. Other thing to keep in mind are the state level association events. There are some that are more policy driven. I focus on those, but for the sake of the people on this call, this is an opportunity to get involved in Tennessee and really become a leader in an emerging market. The Tennessee market is super excited about THC beverage category in general. October 20th through the 22nd is when they do their show. They have a packed dinner, which is a great opportunity. I participated last year. If you want to sponsor it, you can actually sample your product at the venue. So that would be an opportunity because retailers and key legislators and other key influencers in the Tennessee market attend those particular activities and network with each other. And last year, I saw probably 10 leading retailers that were carrying THC beverages already sample their first THC beverage at that pack dinner. And they were obsessed with how great the taste was and literally were ready to place orders at the pack dinner, which was ironic because it was just regular bartenders serving these products. So they're like, we don't work for the brand, sir. But it was exciting. And this is an opportunity. And one thing we heard a lot at the Hemp Beverage Expo was the fact that leading in a key market, getting that leadership status and then expanding into other markets is key. So it's something you're going to want to think about moving forward is, do you need to be everywhere, or do you need to lead in a few states, win those states over, and then use that to earn distribution and retail in other key markets? But this is a really great opportunity. Joyce McDaniel at the Tennessee Wine and Spirits Retailer Association does a great job. We are putting together some content for them on the education side, but they are leading with THC beverage this year in terms of education. So if you're looking for an opportunity to get involved as a brand, early bird discounts have been extended through August 15th. So reach out to Joyce or check out the event online. line, and you can sign up directly with her. And then I always like to add this slide. There's a lot of partners entering this space. We have a lot of big partners entering this space, from Total Wine and Specs to NACS and the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, as well as the distribution partners that we're working with. These are incredible leaders for us to have in the space, and we're looking to continuously grow that. So in terms of growing this space, questions about the market, questions about how you can get involved at the federal level, this is my email address. You can reach out to me directly through here. Obviously, if you've connected with me already, you know how to get a hold of me. But this is the time to get involved, because September is the biggest push we're going to have. Even if we get a CR till the end of the year, we are going to be active in DC probably all throughout the year to get something pushed across federally that then really busts open this category. So getting involved now, if you're not involved already, this is the time. Now I will open it up to questions. It looks like we've got a couple. I will absolutely be sharing notes in the slides, so I will happily share the slides with everybody here that's attended today. So thank you guys for coming. Wholesale distribution for distribution out of the state of production. Goodness. There's a number of resources that we can provide. We have an overview that we use for our members based on the states in terms of what they can sell in what markets based on dosage caps, channels to market, what the tax structure looks like, things like that. But one of the best resources out there in terms of wholesale distribution, licenses required, what's required in certain states, is probably going to be provided by Vicente Law Group. They've got a number of charts and they're updated monthly that you can subscribe to. I believe it's, $850 to $1,000 a month, depending on what information you're looking to be included. So Sean Hauser would be a great contact for that if you took her information down earlier. I can also make a direct relationship or introduction into those groups as well. So feel free to reach out to me if you're looking for very specific information on states. I also recommend, if you have very specific states that your group is particularly focused on, consultants and lawyers that know that market, particularly the alcohol industry, are going to be invaluable. They are going to know that market inside and out. They're also going to know the associations that are handling a lot of the lobbying efforts and advocacy and education efforts that we may be working with, but they will know those groups already and have established relationships. Another question in terms of, can liquor stores in Georgia sell hemp-derived THC beverages? So currently, liquor stores in Georgia cannot. This is something that convenience and grocery have access to. On-premise is also permitted in Georgia. I believe next session, we will be able to get liquor stores and package stores access to these categories. What happened in Georgia is pretty rare, that convenience would be prioritized, but obviously, that just means that there's an opportunity, there for continued expansion. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, which means I might have successfully kept this to 1 hour, which I don't know if I've ever actually been able to keep to that. But if you guys have any other questions on the category, how to get involved, other things I might not have touched on in depth, feel free to reach out to me. Again, my email's up on the screen, diana@adultbevalt.org. I can connect you either with my, colleagues at Vicente or other events and coalitions that you need to get connected to, or I can provide a contact within our organization that might lead our policy committee, as well as some other initiatives that we are doing within the market. So thank you guys for joining today. If you guys have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me, and have a great rest of your Thursday.